The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Welcome in to the Belly Up Sports Major League Baseball Midseason Super Show. My goodness, that's a mouthful. But we're glad to have you here, and we're going to be talking Major League Baseball all night long. We've got an hour worth of Major League Baseball division breakdowns. We're going to be looking at so far this season. We're going to be looking at what's ahead this season. Surprises and all kinds of good stuff as well. And all throughout the program, we're going to be joined by talent from the Belly Up Sports Media Network to talk through these different things. I'm Vince Stover. I'm the host of the Sports Stove podcast, and you see me every Sunday and Wednesday. And I'm joined by Kevin Wilson, who joins me every Sunday night as well at 8 o'clock for the Sports Stove Fantasy Baseball Show. Kevin, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, and I'm super excited. We're talking baseball, and it's not Sunday night, so I'm really excited about that. And the All-Star break is ahead, so this is a great time to settle in and look back and look forward to the baseball season. And so I'm really jazzed.
Are you wearing your San Francisco Giants jersey? What jersey are you wearing today?
There would be zero chance that there would be a San Francisco Giants jersey on. I am wearing
Space
the
City.
Astros. Okay, Space City. Yeah. It's one of the few City Connect uniforms that aren't just awful. And so I'm glad to be wearing this. I was planning on wearing a Dodger shirt because I'll be talking about the NLS as well a little bit later. But then they stabbed me right in the heart earlier today. So that jersey has to stay in the closet for at least one day.
Wow. There you go. Kevin Wilson, the fickle fan. No, I'm kidding, of course. Yeah, and I was joking about the San Francisco Giants. Kevin is not a Giants fan at all. It's the last.
No, you can't be a Dodgers fan and a Giants fan all in the same time. It just does not work.
I thought maybe you had like a Willie Mays jersey or something. I don't know. But no, I didn't expect any Giants jersey. I just saw the orange, and from the video, it looks black. So, but I see the Space City. Everything is great there. It's an intriguing thing. When we're not going to do a breakdown of uniforms tonight, but the City Connect jerseys. You know, my 13-year-old said, "Dad, they pretty much all looked exactly the same."
Awful.
But I love Milwaukee's.
I would say Brew Crew. They did that one right. In Houston, they did right. Colorado, they did right. And I'd be hard-pressed to come up with any others that just aren't in the basement.
I'd have to look at them again to see for sure. But the Brewers, they put the Sports Stove logo right there on their sleeves. So I'm obviously a huge fan of that for sure. Well, we're here, though, to talk baseball more so than baseball uniforms. And we're going to go through each division today. We're going to start off with the American League Central. And I reached out to a couple different Tiger fans who were too embarrassed to come on this show tonight.
No reason to be embarrassed tonight, especially. So,
yeah, well, one game doesn't make or break a season, Kev.
That's true.
No, I'm kidding. They were busy and could not come. I also reached out to a Guardians fan who basically said he was going to be too plastered to come on. So I'm not sure what to think about that. But
we don't need to get any further.
No, that's a whole nother belly up show that you can watch.
That's right.
So let's talk about the American League Central. Right now, it's the Cleveland Guardians on top. They're up 5 games on Minnesota. Kansas City Royals are 7 games back. Those 3 teams all over 500 and actually all well over 500 at this point in the season. The Royals are 8 games over 500 coming into this program. The Tigers, who started off well, have fallen off. They are 4 games under 500. And then the Chicago White Sox are the worst team in Major League Baseball. And so it's been an intriguing season. Like I said, you had the Royals and the Tigers really started off really, really well. Cleveland has been pretty consistent throughout the year. Minnesota has been a little up and down, but currently and recently have been playing pretty good at baseball. What's the biggest surprise of this American League Central division for you, Kevin, when you look at these teams?
Well, I knew going into the season, how big a surprise this is, I'm not too sure, but we knew that the White Sox were not going to be good, but historically bad is a surprise to me, and it is especially surprising when you look who's at the top of their starting rotation. They've got a solid 1-2 punch up there, but then it goes straight down the cellar after that, and so I did not expect that they would be this bad, and I'm disappointed in the Detroit Tigers, who I was talking up before the season began. And as you mentioned, they started off really well, but have really throttled back. And a lot of their players or young players that they have been waiting on haven't really developed. They've got Tarek Scoble, who might be the Cy Young Award winner in the American League, and they've got Flattery, who is pitching extremely well. But after that, they're really not playing that well right now. And so I like Kansas City. Minnesota's been up and down, so there's really not any surprises going there. And the Guardians, you mentioned the consistency, and so that's kind of a surprise because all these other teams have had ups and downs, but Cleveland really hasn't. And so that's a bit of a surprise.
When you look at Chicago White Sox, the two pitchers who have been phenomenal and because of that are now on the trade block. I mean, we didn't talk about these two guys coming into the season. It wasn't like they were the guys that we expected to perform. You could say, well, if Flexen was going to show up and pitch really well, it wouldn't be a complete surprise. But he hasn't. You've got these two guys that are they've been so good. And again, like now they've got a potential to go to a good baseball team because they've been pitching so well that they are, other teams want them, and the White Sox are so bad, they're more than likely to trade them off. Offensively, though, for the White Sox, it's just been there's names that you've heard of that you thought maybe could do okay, but they haven't done well really at all, to be honest with you, through there. My biggest surprise in this division, though, is the Kansas City Royals. I thought they would be better than last year, but I didn't think they'd be above 500 at the All-Star break because as much as I think they're good and they've got this young talent and they got some really exciting players on this team, I didn't think their pitching was going to show up. And even though Bobby Witt's been great and Vinny Pasquantino has had moments of good, Perez has still been really solid as well. Seth Lugo is the story of the All-Star break, really, especially in the American League. And to see what Cole Reagans, Brady Singer, what these guys have done on the pitching side for Kansas City, to me has been the biggest surprise.
Well, I'm going to predict that the Royals will, in fact, make the playoffs. And with that top three that you just talked about, that puts them in the game. Yeah. And so I'm not surprised because I thought the Royals with some of the signings on the offseason that they made and some of the players they brought in and traded for or whatever, but they would be better. So I am pleased that they, you make your procrastinations, whatever that word is. And,
prognostications, yeah.
Okay, so, and they're helping me to be correct in this one area, so I appreciate them on that. So the Royals they're a team that you can get behind, and there's really not a whole lot. Who hates the Royals? I don't know anybody would do that. And so it's going to be an interesting race because I think Cleveland's going to win the division. And then it's going to come down to Minnesota and Kansas City, who is going to take second. And so that should be a fascinating race to watch.
So you think whoever takes second is a wild card team?
I do. And the teams from the East, they can't win all the wild cards. And
they can win two of them.
Well, there's two of them there.
Yeah.
And so there's two more, and I don't see. I'm going to get ahead of myself with the AL West, but so I think yes, at least one of these wild cards are going to come out of the Central.
Okay.
And so it's going to be interesting to watch these teams and how they do things. And can Byron Buxton, in the case of the Minnesota Twins, can he stay healthy? And that's not a bet that you probably want to make too big a bet on that. But so there's some fascinating baseball coming down the road for anyone that likes the NL or the AL Central.
Yeah, I think the final wild card spot is going to be a battle between the Twins and the Red Sox. I don't think the Royals will be there at that point in the year. I think we're going to see them drop off. Now, I say that and look at the other teams in the American League. And are the Rays going to catch up? Or the Tigers going to catch up? Or the Blue Jays going to catch up? Or the A's going to get none of that. So you're really looking at just beating out one or two teams. When you're looking at a team from the West, like maybe the Rangers show up, maybe they don't. The Astros, those kinds of teams. So it's definitely more likely this year than in past years that a third team could still be in the hunt there in the AL Central. But I think the Twins and the Red Sox will battle for the last spot. I really don't think the Royals are going to be there, and I'd be happy to be wrong because, like you said, I don't hate the Royals. I don't have anything against the Royals. They're a fun
team. They're in the middle of the country, and they're just there.
Yeah,
and they don't bring out the passions like, say, a Boston or the Yankees or Dodgers or anything like that. So
yeah, and they're not Canadian, so we like them.
Right, and so there's no problems there. So that's just a solid team to root for.
Yeah, I only say that because I know Brent's watching.
That's right. So that's right. We got to rile him up just a little bit.
Oh my goodness. So the AL Central, I agree with you though. I think Cleveland is the winner. I don't think anybody would be surprised by that right now. They are better than I thought they would be as well, for the record. I didn't see them being this good. They're 58-36 with just one or two more games before the All-Star break, and then plus 87 run differential. They've been really solid. 30-11 at home. They're almost 500 on the road, though, 28-25 on the road. So you want to keep an eye on that. And then against decent teams, they're 24-15 against teams that have a better record than 500. So now there's not a whole lot of teams with a better record than 500 in the league right now. But I like what the Guardians are doing. I am surprised that they're as good as they are. But I think they do. I think they win the division relatively easily, although, again, Twins have sniffed a little closer. And then I think the Twins end up in second place in this division as well. I'm expecting a drop off from Kansas City here after the All-Star break. Having said that, they could make a trade and that could change my mind. If they go out and acquire somebody that really bolsters their team. But you see these guys in the market right now that you're seeing names like Vlad Guerrero, Bo Bichette, as well as these players on lesser teams. Who knows what Kansas City's willing to do to make a run at the playoffs and a run at something, because this might be the year to go after it, with really only Baltimore and New York looking like teams that are scary, in my opinion.
I agree with that. And Kansas City has always had a pretty solid farm system. Yep. So if they want to go ahead and make a move, like you said, you're not always and especially in Kansas City, because this is the first time since they won the World Series that they're actually being discussed as a playoff contender. So you got to strike while it's hot, and it's only going to get hotter as we go forward. So Kansas City, let's make some moves and play some real baseball.
All right, that's the AL Central. Let's move on to the NL East, and joining us to talk about the NL East, I believe he's here at the very least, is a guy that you've done some shows with as well, right, Kevin, the one and only Nathan Nguyen. Hey, Nate, how you doing, man?
Fellas, how we doing?
We're doing good. And
I don't know if you watched on Sunday night, Nathan, but we gave you the most improved fantasy player at the midseason point this year in our fantasy baseball league.
That's right.
We're very impressed with your turnaround from last year to this year.
I'd be much more happy if you weren't so turned around this week. All right, since you and I are playing each other, and we're about, last I looked, about 4 points apart.
All I'm gonna say is, you see what happens when I don't pick up A's players? Like, my team goes from like last to like fifth now. So thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate you both. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, man.
And
let's talk some National League East. A quick kind of recap of where it's at right now. The Phillies 9 games up in the division. The Braves in second. They are at 52-41. Let's see here. The Mets still over 500 and still sniffing the playoffs at 49-45. The Nationals, 18.5 games back, but still impressive nonetheless, 44-52. And then the Marlins, I would argue the third worst team in Major League Baseball. Nate, the Phillies have been a team the last couple years that have been a stacked roster. They've made the playoffs, even made a run, but they've been underachieving in the regular season. And it seems like this year everything's finally clicking.
Oh, 100%. I mean, because we've seen the past couple of years, they haven't won the division yet. They get in the wild card. They're always in the wild card race, I should say. But this year's very different, obviously, right? You could argue if it's because of the Braves and their injuries, but the Phillies are playing so well. They just won today against their pretty bad A's team, right, per se. They lost the night before, but
yeah, Oakland won yesterday, so it's not cry town just right now.
Exactly.
Right,
exactly. And then the Phillies turned it around today. Oh, go ahead, Ben. I'm sorry.
How about one of the biggest reasons why the Phillies are where they are? Ranger Suarez.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, I know he has struggled in his past, 4 or 5 starts, but to start the year, he was absolutely phenomenal. He's still in the Cy Young race as we speak. He still has almost sub 2 ERA, I believe so.
It's ballooned a little bit.
A little bit, right? Yeah. So
yeah, a little bit.
Despite his struggles, he's still, decently doing pretty good for us. I mean, he's an all-star representative, just like 7 other Phillies are in the all-star game. 5
That's
pitchers,
right.
3 position players. So I love Suarez.
And Nate, that's I don't want to get ahead of myself, but that's they've got 5 pitchers.
I know.
You couldn't name 5 pitchers, I don't think, from Philadelphia's pitching staff before now. And so that really is impressive to me. How do you feel about it?
Honestly, I'm absolutely ecstatic. I mean, we've seen guys like Jeff Hoffman, right? He was a guy that was drafted in the first round years before, and he's been struggling. He's been bouncing around teams, and he found a home in Philly, and he had a 1.98 ERA as of today. So he's been phenomenal. Matt Strahm was a former Red Sox reliever. He's been finding himself here in Philadelphia as well. And then we have the obvious, like Zach Wheeler, Ranger Suarez, but Christopher Sanchez, who just signed an extension about a couple weeks ago, a 4-year extension as well. Last year, he was, so-so, but this season has turned it around himself. And he, in my opinion, definitely deserved to be an all-star this year and gets to do so because we'll get to the Braves in a second, obviously, but he replaces Chris Sale on the all-star roster. So hallelujah. I love these Phillies, man. I'm excited to see. This has to be the year, right, Vince and Kevin? This has to be the year where they put it all together because they're always so close.
Yeah, they look like the best team in the National League.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. I mean, plus 125 run differential right now. They've been very solid both on the road and at home as well, and good against good teams. 3 pitchers, Suarez, Wheeler, and Sanchez, all sub 3 ERAs right now. Nola, he's at 3.38, but he's striking people out left and right. He leads the team in innings, leads the team in wins. So they're doing what they need to do right there. But let's move to the Braves. And the Braves they've got injuries that have,
they've
obviously
got injuries with the capital I.
Well, but even before the injuries, they weren't really playing that great of baseball. And we have seen Chris Sale. You brought him up just a second ago too. Chris Sale seems to be returned to form. I mean, he's looked really solid this year too. Do the Braves, Nathan, do they scare you? Like, do you think they could make a run, or are you feeling that they're at this spot this year where they're just not going to be that same team?
I think it's definitely roles reversed with them and the Phillies, right? Because the Braves are usually the ones that win the division. The Phillies are like a wild card team. So this year, the Braves are going to make the playoffs. They will be a wild card team, but I just feel like they will be an easier out than most people think. I'm looking at statistically before the show, I was looking at the stats for the Braves. All I see in the offensive is Ozuna in terms of the leader. So I'm like, that's a bit of a concern. Not to bash Ozuna or anything. It's just that you can.
We bash Ozuna very regularly, so we got no problem with that.
Perfect.
But give us your biggest surprise in the division so far, good or bad, that you've seen in this division.
Definitely the Mets. I thought the Mets are kind of going to be like a 4th, 5th place team. I do think because the Marlins made the playoffs last year, they would kind of still be in the hunt in the NL East. But the Mets have turned it around. I mean, I know they had their struggles early in the season. And then ever since they brought in Grimace and a third baseman who can sing, apparently, they've been winning games, man. So I think they're on a 5-game winning streak right now. And they're at 49 and 45, like you mentioned as at the beginning, Vince. So these Mets are turning around. I kind of am rooting for them to kind of make a wild card spot because the vibe, it's just the vibes of the team. It's not, just because of, of the lack of star players. Of course, we know Alonso and Lindor, who should have made the All-Star game, in my opinion, as well. But the point is, they've turned it around. Despite some lackluster pitching, they're doing pretty well themselves right now in the East.
Yeah, I agree. Well, Kevin, you have a surprise in the East that's different than the Mets?
Well, not really, because especially when the Mets have been on this hill, right? A series of hills, because we called them the Mess, and that wasn't too long ago. And they earned that title. And then they played a little better, and then they went back to the Mess again. And as you said, Nathan, they brought in Grimace. Yeah. And so that pumped some life into them, however you want to explain that. But and the Mets are a team that's, even though it's New York, are not like the Yankees. The Mets don't generate the hate like the Yankees do.
Yeah.
And just remember where they were a year ago. They were selling off everybody that was worth anything that, they were selling off the Vegas and everything else off that team. But this year, I see a difference. They're going to be bringing in, they're going to be a buyer. And so I would not have expected the New York Mets to be a buyer coming up on the trade deadline. So that's a surprise.
I'll mix it up a little bit. I think my biggest surprise is the Marlins being as bad as they are. Nate, you mentioned earlier that, we could see them being a 3rd place team coming into the season. I mean, they even added some guys this offseason, and they have just been so bad. If the White Sox weren't so bad, and really I put the Rockies under the Marlins too. But I mean, the Marlins are fighting really hard for that final spot. They're minus 153 in run differential. That is just sad. Why have the tax situation and the nice weather and then turn this in? It's just really, really sad. So I'll go with the Marlins as my biggest surprise. Let's go playoffs. Well, let's start with, are we all in agreement the Phillies win this division?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They could go into a coma today and they're still going to win the division.
Well, I won't agree with that, but let's talk wild card then. Do we see the Braves and the Mets, or just one of those teams, or none of those teams in the wild card? Nate?
I would say the Braves will make it for sure. The Mets are a bit shaky, but I think they will be in the hunt for that final wild card spot. So, I think both teams will make it in by the end of the season.
Kim?
Oh, Atlanta, absolutely. Because for no other reason than the National League as a whole is down. Because you only got a few teams that have winning records. You could be at 500 and you're in the hunt.
Yeah.
So, and the Braves are better than that, even with all the losses that they've had on injuries and everything else. But so they're in, unless they go into a coma. And then the Mets, they're right there. I think they're going to make some moves and bring in some players this year, as I mentioned. And so put those two teams in.
Yeah,
all three of them. Let's do that right now.
If the trades go down a certain way, I could fall with you guys with the Mets, but I think the Braves are in. I think the Mets will fall off, kind of like the Royals a little bit as well. And I think we're going to see some teams, especially out west, play a lot better in the second half. And I think they'll be able to overtake the Mets as well. So I think Braves make the wild card. I don't think the Mets do, but I think they're going to be at least in the hunt as it comes down to it as well. So this should be a good time. Nathan, tell everybody about your all your content. You got a couple things going on.
Yes, sir. So as usual, you can catch my writing content on bellyupsports.com, covering the New York Giants of the NFL and the Oakland Athletics of the Major League Baseball, right? Got some fancy content coming out as well, starting this upcoming week. And then I host a podcast called the 3rd and 10 Podcast with my guy, Brian Germanaro. We talk NFL and Notre Dame football as well. So episodes Tuesdays and Thursdays. And y'all can catch us there on the 3rd and 10 podcast. But thank you to you, Vince. Thank you to Kevin for having me on. And it's been a blast. I know it's been 10 minutes or so, but it's always a fun time talking with you guys. And go Phils, baby.
Well, Nathan, we brought you on because you are a Phillies fan, but you also at least pay attention to the A's, which is rare. We don't know any A's fans. So continued good luck.
They only have, if you include Nathan, that's 9 fans that Oakland has right now.
Yeah. So good luck to the Oakland, Sacramento / Las Vegas Athletics in the days ahead. Nathan, thanks, man. We sure appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Have a great one.
All right, Nathan Nguyen. There you go. That's the NL East. And now it's time to go up north as we talk the American League East. And we welcome in our friend from Canada. Hey, Brent, how you doing, man?
Hey.
I'm doing well, boys, even though there was a little bit of a shot to Canada somehow, some way, from the 2 nicest guys in sports in the business. And from you guys, I was a bit surprised it came from you guys coming with something like that.
Well, I know that, Canadian hockey hasn't really been that exciting for you, at least not bringing home the trophies. So we figured baseball might be that spot for you. And then Toronto does what Toronto does. So, but you don't care. You're a Yankees fan. What do you care about Toronto?
Yeah, well, the Stanley Cup almost made its way back with the Oilers taking it to 7 games after being down 3. And that was exciting, to say the least. But to start talking some baseball, the Toronto Blue Jays are doing Toronto Blue Jays stuff with high hopes. It's just, they're the only team we got. So they're right across the country. And Jays fans right across this nation are up in arms, to say the least.
Well, let's do a quick recap of where we're at in the season. Baltimore and New York are all knotted up at the top of the division. Baltimore's had a rough week, losing 5 straight. The Yankees are right there again. They were at the top for a long time. Baltimore overtook them for a week or two. The Red Sox continue to impress. They're 10 games over 500, 4.5 back from the division. And then the Rays, well, they finally put a guy in jail. And the Blue Jays, they've got everybody in baseball jail right now. So
right.
We won't talk about the real jail, but we'll talk about the other stuff going on right now as well. Brent, let's start with the Red Sox. I know you're not a Red Sox fan, but how surprised are you that this team has been as good as they have been?
Extremely, extremely surprised, considering they have Rafael Devers and a whole bunch of who knows what's going on there. And the way that the ownership group basically talked about they were going to throw away this season, not really put a whole bunch of time and effort into what we got going on. They pretty much succumb themselves to maybe being a 500 baseball team and not making the playoffs. Well, it's another year in Red Sox land, going back to the mid 80s, where that's just kind of how things were back then. And then in the 90s as well, they did fall into 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever World Series. We don't want to talk about those a whole bunch, but the way that the team and the organization itself didn't give much of a chance or any high expectations, and the way that they've come together and put together a winning season, it says a lot about Alex Cora and his managerial skills. Now, like you say what you want about the Red Sox and everything else, like you said, I'm a Yankee guy. The guy can manage a baseball team, and he can get guys going in the right direction. So you got to give full props to Cora and the group there in Boston.
How much fear's the wrong word? How much do you respect the Orioles and or the Red Sox in this division race as a Yankees fan?
I fear the Red Sox, because if they're where they are, they can make a deal at the deadline. And the thing is, like last year, you had 2 wild card teams that went to the World Series, and now if you can get sniffing around that a little bit, and you got the Red Sox have some deep pockets, and who knows what they have in their farm system. If the ownership group goes, you know what? We've been this good without really trying anything. Let's go and add a player here and add a player there and see what we can do. And that's got to put the fear of God into a lot of players, a lot of other teams in the American League. And the Orioles is the same way. The Orioles were a playoff team last year, didn't do much, and now they have a different ownership group. And with Cal Ripken in the likes there, they could go out and get a guy or two. They're not going to get rid of obviously their stud players, but their farm system is very strong. And that's the big thing with baseball, guys, as you know, is that prospects are great, but there's something that to be held for this time of year when you're close, because getting that playoff appearance and getting that playoff chance and winning a game or two, you never know what you could do. And you have the team like the Red Sox, and you have a team like the Orioles who can, haven't spent a ton of money this year, especially the Orioles, but they're right there. They're in first place. They went and had a Corbin Burns in the off season. I know Vince, you're probably not too happy about the way he's been performing, but going to the All-Star game again. But the way this team is playing in Baltimore, they're real good, and not kind of good. They're real good, and there's no reason why they couldn't win themselves a World Series with what they have.
Yeah, so I mean, I am in no way a Baltimore Orioles fan. That being said, when we went to Florida this summer and saw the Orioles were in town, I went out and snatched tickets because I wanted to go watch them. They're a fun team to watch, and I got lucky enough to watch Corbin Burns pitch too, which was pretty cool. But that was a lot of fun. This Orioles team is young for the most part, and there's going to come some pains with that as well. Matt Holliday, obviously, he came up and he did literally nothing, and got sent back down. He's been fine down in the minors, and he will be fine, I still think, at some point up at the majors too. Before we talk Yankees, let's hit Blue Jays real quick. I am in shock with just how disappointing the Blue Jays have been with the roster that they have.
They have everything that they've been building. We go back to the Baltimore Orioles. They've been building this franchise around two guys, Bo Bichette and Vladdy Guerrero Jr. for a long time, and not a couple of weeks, long time, like a long time. That they've been talking about these guys. They've been the face of the franchise forever and ever, and just nothing's happened. They haven't done well. They went and acquired pitching. They went and acquired this. They went and acquired that. Firing managers left and right and everything else. It's been two guys that have been at the forefront of this failure, and I think that's got to be a lot more heat put on Bichette and on Guerrero. That they this day of getting a free pass, those days got to be gone, because you're supposed to do this, you're supposed to do that, and you start demanding. And I don't like talking about money. I don't like that at all, because it's everybody. If somebody offered me a $30 million contract, I'd say yes in a heartbeat. So I don't want to say that no one deserves that kind of money. But when you start asking for that kind of money and making demands, and the whole franchise is built around two guys who have Guerrero's got some home runs, but other than that, they haven't done anything. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that the sad reality to Blue Jays fans right across Canada is that this team hasn't done anything, and they're not going to do anything this year. They're not making the playoffs. They took another step back. It's time to. I don't want to say the fat lady sung and it's all over, but she sure is humming a tune right now for the Toronto Blue Jays. I think it's over for this group. I think it's time for the Jays to move on and start doing something else. But because before you know it, you're gonna have a couple 30-year-old players who are making $35 million a year, and you still have nothing. So what's the big promise? Because you can only sell to Jays fans the renovations at I still call it Skydome. It shows my age a little bit, but you can only show the new renovations at the Skydome as a look to the future. Nobody cares. We want to win. We want to do things, because Jays fans have a very short window of time to cheer, because it's a Toronto Maple Leafs hockey town, and always will be. And when you get a chance like they did in 2016, 2017, and on when they went to the playoffs, and it was exciting right across the country, and people in Canada were really looking for this Jays team to do something this year, and they just didn't. They just flat out didn't. And I think it's time to move on from those guys, because you could probably get a lot of good prospects, and prospects are just prospects. It's another kid that fills your lineup. But I think it's time, personally, for the Jays to move on from these two guys and say, you know what, let's save some money and see if we can't build something for next year and going forward, because it hasn't worked, and I can't see it working, because they're the two constants in this entire thing. Those two guys have been around the entire time, and and nothing's been accomplished.
And you can get back a haul, I think, for them too. If you do move on from them, I think Vlad and Bo Bichette both would a pretty big return and trading off those guys.
And maybe that's the way to go, because the Blue Jays have brought in players like Varsho. It hasn't worked. They brought in Turner.
He's in 200.
Hasn't worked, right? And guys like that, and it has not worked. Gossman has not been what you would expect him to be. So bringing some young guys and just turn it over and let them develop. And the Astro way from 10 years ago or so.
Like when you
Maybe
bring
that's
in a guy like the Jays, and I was pretty hard on IKF Isaiah Kiner-Falefa last year when the Yankees brought him in from Detroit, and he turned out to be a very serviceable player throughout the utility guy all over the infield. But he hasn't done much for the Jays either. And when he's your big offseason acquisition, and nothing against IKF, this is who he is. But when he's your big offseason acquisition, you're expecting him to get past the wild card, you aren't doing it. It's just not enough. It's just not enough.
All right, let's talk Yankees real quick. Obviously, the Soto trade did not pay off. Just kidding. Soto's been great as we expected. Back to form. Judge has been really solid as well. What really helped you guys at the beginning of the season was great pitching. When that struggled, the team struggled. So how comfortable are you with the pitching staff you have in place?
I'm not like – I got my fill of watching Marcus Stroman when he was pitching for the Jays years ago. I'm not a big he's not one of my favorite guys. His attitude is kind of one of those I could do without being a baseball purist, I guess you could say. I'm not a big Rodon guy. He's been not very good. But I think that you looked at Garrett Cole's start last night. He was fantastic against the Baltimore Orioles in a big game for the Yankees. You don't want to say that July the 12th is a huge game, but it is a huge game because the Yankees have been struggling. I think that their pitching staff is going to be okay. Are they a top 3, top 4 in the league? No, because I don't put much faith in Nestor Cortez and his antics on the hill. That little dance he does when he throws once in a while, it's passe and whatever. If you want to play with the Savannah Bananas, go ahead and do that out there. It's just one of those, like, man, I'm sounding old like you two right now, but it's one of those things. It's just you just wonder where they're going to be. Like the Yankees, they were the first to 50 wins and they went on a big dip, and it's odd that it all kind of went to hell in a handbasket when Stanton got hurt. And Stanton, like, he hasn't done a darn thing since he's been there. And Stanton leaves the lineup and the Yankees start losing. But their offense will be fine. But I just don't think that team is. I mean, it's Yankee fans are harder than anybody on the Yankees, but I don't think that team is going to be good enough because you have half the lineup who doesn't hit very well. You have a pitcher here and there who doesn't have a great lineup, and do you trust the bullpen? I don't know how much I do. You don't see anybody who really jumps out at you and says that no matter what, Mariano Rivera's coming. Mariano ain't coming back. So you don't have him coming out of the bullpen. The Yankees are real good. I don't know if they're have the go to the Seinfeld youthful exuberance per se of the Baltimore Orioles. I just think the Orioles are the team to beat in that division.
All right, so that answers my next question probably. Who wins the division? You say the Orioles team to beat. Kev, who wins the division?
I really want to say the Orioles, really, because as you mentioned, they're the youthful team, and but they're in the midst of as you mentioned, a pretty. We talk about the Cubs curse. Well, they pump life over there in the Cubs, and so they can't be forgiven for that sort of thing. But I think this battle goes all the way down to the end, and so both of them are in the playoffs. There's no question in my mind about that. And so the Orioles, I've talked about them before. They won 103 last year. So I think that the Orioles will win it because I think they've got the better pitching, and that's what's going to come down to.
Yeah, I'll always go with the pitching, and Orioles have it right now. Again, we get through a trade deadline, and it could shift. But for right now, I'd go with the Orioles the way the roster sit.
Especially the way that strikeouts don't matter anymore to franchises for some reason. I will never understand that because the more you get on base, the more runs you're more likely to score. I don't know how math doesn't work in baseball. It works everywhere else in the free world, but with having guys strike out as much and how pitching and power pitching is a thing now, and that's why I think the Baltimore has that opportunity to maybe do something special this year. And they got a couple guys go out, but Gunnar Henderson's having an MVP type of season, and this is one of those years where you like a team that Baltimore had 100 and some losses not that long ago, and this might be one of those franchises that the right across the country people get behind a little bit and they start doing some special things. It'd be fun to watch, see a young team and a different team win something. I mean, it's been a while since Baltimore's been successful. It could be interesting to see them do it. Will the Yankees put up a fight? Yeah, but I expect Baltimore to win this division.
All right. Who else makes the playoffs in this division? Do the Red Sox make the wild card?
Yeah, I think they're going to go out and make a deal. I really do. I think they're going to go make a deal now. They're close, and at the end of the day, owners are going to see maybe one more home gate or something for in the playoffs. I think they could possibly do some damage. And the Red Sox are still the Red Sox. I mean, they got real deep pockets. So if they want to do something, and like I said earlier, they weren't expected to do much, and now they're doing something. Why not go and drop a few bucks and see what they can do? It can't hurt.
Yeah, Kev.
I agree with that, and that's one of the bigger shocks. I'll go with that as my shock in that division. I didn't think Toronto would be as bad as they are, but
no one did. No
one thought that. But I had no inkling that the Red Sox, maybe 500, I thought they could do. Especially when you're in this division, but 10 games over 500 is a real shock to me. So I think that they'll make some moves, as you mentioned, and so all three of these teams, they're in the playoffs.
Brent, biggest surprise in the division, good or bad?
How bad the Jays are. Like you can't stress that enough. Like everybody had them making the next step with those two big studs, and you forget about like how this team's been building for quite some time. And there was a guy by the name of Kevin Biggio. They told him to go away too, and he didn't amount to anything, anything.
He hasn't amounted anything on the Dodgers either.
He's in the Dodgers now. So you had three guys who are kids of major league great players, and they haven't amounted to anything. And that's the biggest thing is how bad this team is. Yeah, I know you can't put it on one or two guys in a game of baseball, but you know what? Sometimes you can. And maybe it's an attitude thing. Maybe it's something like that. Maybe, who knows? Maybe it's something that's been brewing for a long time, but now it's hit an apex, and I think there's going to be some heads rolling finally in Toronto. So that to me in this division is how bad these teams are, because the Yankees are the Yankees, the Rays are the Rays. They stick around, they're okay, but they don't really do anything. And then you have Baltimore, who was expected to do something, and then all of a sudden you have a Toronto team that people are like, this team. When you get to one of your players on the front of MLB 24 or whatever it is, it's usually a good sign for how good a team's supposed to be, and how bad they've been it's a shock to not only Canadian baseball fans, but I think baseball fans right across the United States as well.
And my surprise is Holiday and the Orioles just not being able to find it once he got up after the great spring training that he had. And he's been great in the minors too. So I'm interested to see when he gets another opportunity and what he looks like when he does.
But maybe maybe it's one of those things too. Maybe he's a great prospect, and sometimes prospects are just prospects. Sometimes it just doesn't work. Right. Yeah. You can be a great, and you forget, it's so high school, when you come out of high school or wherever it might be, you forget all of a sudden this kid was 17 years old. And all of a sudden he's going up on a daily basis, going up against guys who are throwing 93, 94 with stuff that matters, not some high school yokel kid from the whatever team, right? I know these guys have better scout eyes than I do, obviously, but sometimes you're like, oh man, he's not a big body by any means, and just maybe a year or two in college wouldn't have been the worst thing for some of these guys, because trying to push these guys through, I see it a lot in the league that I'm involved with here. You see these guys are 18, 19 years old. Well, he might be good. Well, what's might get you? Yeah, it doesn't get you anything, right? But
very true. Brent Radlinsky, tell us about your show, the 1420 podcast.
1420 Sports Bar Podcast. We're on a little bit of a summer hiatus. Running the baseball team's a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, boys, but it's one of those things. My gosh, I haven't slept very much in the last 2 months, but no, we're a little hiatus coming back 1st of August. Better than ever. We're coming. We do baseball and hockey and football and everything else for our own little sports bar twist of things. And thanks, boys, for having me on the show tonight. Greatly
always a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Brent. Appreciate you as well. And we were just kidding about the knocks on Canada.
That's right.
I believe everybody said I got my people with drones and stuff coming to hunt you guys down. So whatever.
All right.
Okay, they're already on their way.
Okay, boys, take it easy. We'll talk soon.
We'll see you. See ya. Brent Radlinsky there, Belly Up Sports 1420 Sports Bar Podcast. Good show. Lots of good coverage up there as well. All right, let's bring him in. He's been waiting, and we've been holding him here. He is the writer. Baseball writer at bellyupsports.com. He's got all kinds of great content that comes out over all kinds of teams. He's Eric Katz. Hey, Eric, how you doing, man?
Good. How about yourself, Vince?
Doing good. We brought you in to talk the NL Central. We brought you on a little later than promised. I apologize, but let's get into it. You live up in the Wisconsin area. You're seeing firsthand what's going on up there at Milwaukee. And what I thought was a very impressive start to the season has been a skid into the All-Star break right now. What's the general thought up there in Milwaukee or that area with the Brewers right now?
Well, I think the deal with the Brewers right now is, I think they're starting to feel it with having a lack of starting pitching. Mm-hmm. I mean, Pat Murphy's done a great job working with very little, but to me, I don't think Freddie Peralta's an ace. Yeah. I think that, it was a good idea at the time, but really, he's really like a number 2, number 3. But I really believe that, I don't think the Brewers have enough starters. I think they'll clinch the division based on offense, but at the deadline, they got to make a move for a starter. I'm hoping they go after someone who can be numero uno at the top. But
yeah, I think you watch the White Sox, those two guys at the top of the White Sox rotation as potential guys that the Brewers could go out and get. I've been seeing Max Scherzer's name a whole lot linked to Milwaukee, which I would be very surprised if Max Scherzer ends up in Milwaukee.
I'd be shocked because I know the Brewers have the kids to do it, but I don't see them doing it because I don't believe they have I don't think they'll truly do it because I don't think they want to sacrifice that many people for him. But plus, I don't think the Brewers are willing to pay that kind of money for him. Right. Well, because I'm sure they'll have to break up the salary somehow for him to go over there.
Yeah.
And so I don't see them making that kind of move. I mean, I'd love it if they went after a Garrett Crochet. I mean, I could see Eric Fetty being that person the Brewers at. I know he's been linked to it several times, but I'd love it if they go after a Yusei Kikuchi, who I think would be terrific for him. Who's a free agent at the end of the year, and the Blue Jays are going nowhere this year. So I could see them going after something like that, or possibly even Chris Bassett if they really want to. They at least should ask about him because I think he'd be he's been a number 1 before.
Yeah. Very true. The rest of this division has been really weird. Pirates started off great. They're under 500. Reds had massive expectations. They're under 500. The Cubs are cursed by the baseball gods, and the Cardinals all of a sudden appear out of nowhere. They start the year looking like they're just going to be like last year's team, but now they're 4 games back from the division. So talk about the Cardinals a little bit and what you're seeing and where's your confidence level with the Cardinals at this point in the season?
Well, they're certainly hitting the ball a lot better. I think that pitching wise, we knew that they would be improved. They would at least improve. I didn't expect it to be this good. I mean, Sonny Gray's a bona fide ace and is a bona fide ace. There's no question about it. Obviously I didn't expect them to get the production that they would get from Lance Lynn, who's looking like the Lance Lynn of old, as well as Kyle Gibson, who was really brought in just to eat innings, but he's pitching really, really, really well. Because originally I thought he was a one-show pony because he got so much run support in Baltimore, where he really didn't have to really go hard out of the gate to try and keep his team in the game, because all he had to do was just hang out and just his guys would hit the ball, and all he'd have to do was go out there and get the outs. No worries about no pressure to it. But he's been a pleasant surprise for them. They're a hot team right now. I think that they need to go after at least one more arm. I don't think it's enough for them to go deep, because that's been their Achilles heel in the playoffs whenever they've been in there. Their pitching gets hit hard, and their bats, and it's going to also. But one thing I'm curious to see is, can Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt
get it together?
Can they do something in the postseason? Because Arenado's been worse than A-Rod's has been worse than A-Rod in the postseason. And, I think Paul Goldschmidt hasn't been too great either. So it's going to be curious. Can they both get hot at the same time, which never has really hasn't really happened consistently for them.
Kevin, do you remember we were reading through the starters for the Cardinals back in February, and I brought up Lance Lynn's name. Do you remember what you said about Lance Lynn back then?
I don't remember what exactly I said, but I'm sure it was not complimentary at all. And so
that's correct. I didn't pull the tape on it. Neither one of us, by the way. I'm not saying that I was high on Lance Lynn.
No, nobody's lighting fireworks off of Lance Lynn. So
he's not like, I mean, in his defense though, he did pitch on some really bad Chicago White Sox teams. Fair. I mean, he save for the 1 year where he was actually a productive pitcher, but with the Dodgers, he was with the Dodgers last season. He was a little better, not nearly as bad with the White Sox, but he was a little bit better. He kind of gave him someone in the back end of their rotation and kind of eat innings and get some strikeouts. But he's kind of come back to being the Lance Lynn that a solid number 3 pitcher, and that's what he's been for the Cardinals this season.
Eric, how many people outside of Vince and the Sports Stove podcast believe that Craig Counsell going to the Cubs was a negative thing, and that the baseball gods were going to curse this team because of his backstabbing, and he's just a horrendous human being?
I can remember your eruption.
What are your thoughts on the Cubs being in last place at the All-Star break?
Well, their issues, they had some issues that they had to attack, and it was issues that happened last year. So I really don't think it's the manager. I really think it was just, number one, their bullpen was a problem last year. I don't think you can really blame them for Azalea all of a sudden falling off, because I don't think they could have anticipated that, because he was a solid closer last year. I know Hector Neris, which, he's a good pitcher, but he allows a lot of traffic on the bases. Yeah, he gets out of it, but what happens when he allows runners, it sometimes can be bad, and that's what we've seen. And all of a sudden the Cubs are trying to make him a closer, which he is not and has never been a closer in his career. I think starting pitching wise, well, we knew that would be a problem. We knew they would, aside from Shota Amanaga, we knew they needed at least another arm. And Kyle Hendricks is past his prime. He's getting lit up like a pinball machine. And we just knew that their pitching would be an issue, and it had some question marks. I mean, aside from Amanaga, nothing. I mean, they're not even hitting either. Swanson's falling off. So really, it's just a combination of just an organizational failure on the Cubs' part. But them being in last place, I think to an extent, though, baseball gods are kind of mad at the local boy for going to Chicago. I think they might have heard your probably on a podcast, one of the top 3 biggest meltdowns I've ever seen, where I'm not sure if we can repeat it.
Now, Cody Bellinger, I've seen his name linked to Houston right now. Obviously he played well last year. Again, this year it's just no one has been the same. Any of the good guys, I really haven't been the good guys again this year in Chicago. Do you think Bellinger gets moved?
I do. I mean, I don't think the Cubs really need the prospects per se, because the Cubs have a nice farm system. I think it's within the top 5, I believe. But I think what they should do is move Bellinger for some relief arms, because I think that's what they really need. And also, odds are, they're not really getting the Cody Bellinger of last year, who had 90+ RBI and who had an incredible surge in the second half of the season, which still can very well happen again. But it remains to be seen. To be truthful, I don't think the Cubs are going anywhere. I think that they've got a lot of problems in that organization that they got to address, because there are some things that they neglect. And I think what it comes down to is Tom Ricketts, despite being in like the third largest market in the United States, he refused to touch the luxury tax. That's just how he is.
Hey, I can't blame the guy. That being said, Houston does have some bullpen arms that haven't been great this year, but have a history of being very good. I don't know if they would give them up for Cody Bellinger or not, though. Let's go through the division a little bit here. Biggest surprise, good or bad, in this division, Eric?
I got to say bad. I'm going to go with the Reds. To be truthful, last year they were playing relevant baseball and were kind of hanging around toward the end of the year and had some great bats. Obviously, Elly De La Cruz is, as great as they come. I think he will be an all-star in the future. He's got to figure out his glove, but because he's a really bad defensive shortstop. But I'm surprised the Reds have kind of gone downhill like they did. I really thought they would come together and really have kind of like a Baltimore Orioles like turnaround where I'm not sure about winning I really thought they were going to win the Central. And it's a weak division. You got some just dominant bats. I think part of it too is injuries. Part of it too is injuries. No one saw Novelli Marte getting suspended. But at the end of the day, though, the Reds are just, to me, are like a big disappointment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the Reds fans agree with you on that. Everyone looks at me and they say, well, you're a Brewers fan, so you're a homer. Tell me where I've been wrong on the Reds and the Cubs. The Reds, I tried to tell their fans, they're going to disappoint you. It's just plain and simple. They're going to disappoint you. I thought they had some fantasy relevance this year. But as far as a legit threat, they're just not that team that puts it together, in my opinion, although they have some really good young talent. Lane gets hurt at the beginning of the year too, so that probably doesn't help them. Steer didn't start off well, but he's playing better now. Dela Cruz has some good things. I think. I locally here, it sounds like they're going to move him to center field at some point, but probably not this season. So, and then I thought they improved in the pitching category this year, at least in their rotation, but they haven't been good enough for sure. Kevin, biggest surprise in the NL Central?
I don't know if there's a biggest surprise because I don't think we really knew what to make of this whole division before the season began. And so I know they're your Brewers, but I didn't see them being as good as they've been. So I'm pleasantly surprised about the Brewers, and so they're in first. So I thought, well, maybe they could make a battle. I thought it was going to be more of a rebuilding year for them, but they're in first, so that's a surprise to me.
Yeah, I think the Brewers
lockstep when it comes to Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. I'll tell you what the biggest surprise is. Okay, the Pittsburgh Pirates have the starting pitcher in the National League All-Star game. If that's not a surprise, I don't know what is. So that's what I'm going to go with, and a rookie on top of it all.
Yep. Yeah, I think the Brewers pitching has been one of the bigger surprises for me. Now, recently they haven't been as good, but they really started off the year well and kind of just made do. Everyone kept falling off the cliff, and someone else would step in and hold the rope. But I think that the Pirates was kind of my next choice there as well. One game under 500. Kevin, I remember you talking about them being better at the beginning of the year, and I think my dad did as well. I just didn't see it, and the Pirates have been a lot better than I anticipated. Jones early in the year pitched really well, and then Skeens, of course, when he came up, he was everything that they were hoping he would be. And like you said, starting in the National League All-Star game team.
Not even his parents could have envisioned that he'd be starting the National League All-Star game as a rookie. Nope.
Oh,
even in their dreaming at night, they couldn't have come up with something like that.
All right, let's go ahead.
I don't think you could have anticipated him being as great as he's been, where the Pirates have a lead every single time he's out there, and then also, him pretty much giving them the best opportunity to win, where, basically it's like a dream come true for an American child. You get called up, like within, like you're down in the minors for a little bit, but you get called up, and then all of a sudden you're the ace of a staff, and then you start the All-Star game. I mean, and then also another note, you're dating Livy Dunn. So life is perfect for him. life is absolutely, couldn't be more perfect for him.
Who wins the division, Eric?
I'm going to go with the Brewers. I think the Brewers are going to add an arm or two. They've been hitting the ball well this year, to my surprise. They have been shockingly good offensively. But ultimately, I see the Brewers taking it. The Cardinals, I really think they're going to fade away. That's just kind of how they roll.
Kev, who wins?
Yeah, the Milwaukee, I think they win a division. The Cardinals, the thing that really surprises me about the Cardinals is maybe not where they are, but they're shockingly bad at home.
Yeah.
And that's not, because they're only a couple games above 500 at home.
Yeah.
And you cannot be taken seriously as a contender. And I'm going to get into this with another team here in a minute, I'm sure. But they are usually dominant at home, and they have not been this year. So I like some of the things they've done, like Burleson. I'm really, really, really high on him. But and I like their pitching, but they're only the Milwaukee Brewers out of this division are going to make the playoffs.
Okay, so I think the Crew win too. I think they make the right additions here at the trade deadline. I think they get another bullpen piece along with someone in the rotation as well. They are hitting the ball extremely well, and they're the best team in the division as far as run differential goes. Eric, wild card. Is there a wild card team out of the National League Central?
No.
Okay, Kevin, you already said no, right?
Yep. No.
All right, here you go. You ready for it?
Okay.
Cincinnati Reds, your wild card team. They're gonna make a run here in the second half. And they're
see, now you're reversing yourself.
They're going to sneak you into the last spot on the wild card and get eliminated there.
You heard it here first at 7:00 Central Time on Saturday. Vince reversed himself. There's no way I could have predicted that.
Don't guess like the fans like that. You just said that they disappoint. And now all of a sudden,
that's right. That's right. You talk about. You might want to check your neck because you reversed yourself so hard that listen. Neck injuries are a concern at this point.
If you look at the rosters in the NL Central, the Cardinals, they've got pieces for sure, and they could add something that makes them viable for a wild card spot. But they seem to be the kind of team that's going to trail off, like Eric mentioned earlier. The Pirates, they just don't have enough experience there, enough talent really there to make that run. The Cubs, again, I think they're going to trade off some guys. I think they're going to just mail it in until next season. You look at the Reds roster, if they add bullpen pieces, which they can do pretty cheap, and they've got the system to trade some guys and get somebody good in return. If they do that, they've got the offense too. They're the only other team in the Central Division that has the offense. So if they can shore up their pitching, and I can't promise you they're going to do it because let's face it, their management is weird. But if they make the right pitching moves, they'll have the roster that should be a playoff team. And you look at the rest of the West, the Diamondbacks a game over 500, the Padres a game over 500, the Pirates a game under 500. The Giants, you're not worried about them. The Cubs, you're not worried about them. I mean, all they got to do is get ahead of the Cardinals, and they're basically sitting in a wild card spot. So, but they have to make a move. They have to make at least 2 moves with their pitching staff in order to be there. They've got the offensive talent to be there. So, there you go.
Okay.
My rant on the disappointment they'll be to their fans. Yes, I've made a quick shift as I look at the rosters and realize they're the best team outside of the Brewers. They should be on paper the best team outside of the Milwaukee Brewers in the Central.
Stop gaslighting them, Vince.
All right, Eric, you're writing all the time, man. You're dropping articles like I think you're dropping 7 a day, man. Tell everybody where they can find your stuff at.
You can find my stuff at bellyupsports.com where I'm writing about all things baseball. Yes, I hate your team too. And as a writer, I root for great stories, not teams.
Very true. He writes about every team, every player, everything that's going on. He's out there putting stuff out. You can find it nearly every day.
That's right. Just go to Belly Up Sports and then just curl up because you're going to be taking a while to read all his stuff. Then it's all excellent.
Thank you, Kevin.
You're very welcome.
How much did you and Vince come up with for you to say that?
He lost a bet.
Well, we expect an envelope to be slid under the door any second now. So,
Eric, I'm going to come up next year and catch a Brewers game with you. So we'll be in touch about that.
Call me. Hey, just you know where to find me. I'll it's great because I live not far from the stadium, and they got a little bus that will take you to the ballpark instead of driving to the stadium. You just have to buy a drink.
Nice. Okay. All right. Hey, thanks, Eric. We appreciate your input. I appreciate everything that you do for the network as well. And we'll talk to you again soon. Okay.
Talk to you soon.
All right. That's Eric Katz from bellyupsports.com. All right, Kevin. We went long with Brent so we're over time. So let's get moving on the AL and NL West.
Okay. I'm ready. I'm ready.
Right. And we're going to start with the AL West. The current setting is the Mariners a 1.5 up on the Astros. The Rangers, a massive disappointment, 6.5 back. The Angels and the A's, right where we thought they would be. Biggest surprise in the American League West?
Well, the biggest surprise to me is the Texas Rangers because at the halfway point, they had the 3rd worst record ever for a defending World Series champion. So nobody could have predicted that. Nobody could have predicted that their offense has been – because last year they won, at least early on by their hitting. They were a hitting juggernaut. They were like over 100-run differential. And so let me switch over to the AL. You got Texas is at +6. That's not going to cut it. So that's my biggest surprise. And it was I won't say it's a surprise. Well, maybe it was. nobody could have. I didn't see Houston being as bad as they were starting off the season, but I never let up off the throttle with them. I always thought that they would get straightened out. And entering today, I know they lost earlier to the Rangers. It was a very close game, very good game. But anyway, they have creeped up to a game out.
Mm-hmm.
That's all they were, a game out as entering today's play. So, as you mentioned, there's nothing surprising about Oakland. There's nothing surprising about the Angels. And the Mariners, they've been winning on their pitching. Their hitting has been nothing short of Cal Raleigh hitting, home runs from both sides of the plate, but then he'll strike out 3 times the next day. Okay, so the biggest surprise by far is how bad the Texas Rangers have been in the first half.
Yeah. You look at this division, Oakland's already halfway to their win total coming into the year, by the way, which was 56.5. The Rangers were expected their total was at 89.5. Houston's at 92.5 and Seattle at 86.5. I think you look at the Seattle team, I think for them to be first place and Julio Rodriguez not playing that great this season is impressive to see where they are. But again, it gives me zero confidence in this team moving forward. I stick on the Astros here, but yeah, Rangers are without a doubt the biggest surprise of the season so far. What about who wins this division? I mean, at the end of the day, that's the biggest question I think right now in this division.
It's an important question because there's one coming up in a minute. If I think another team out of this division is going to win, be in the wild card. I do not. So you need to win this division. That's what I think. And so Houston, haven't backed off them all season, pulling up to a game out. So I'm certainly not going to back off of that right now. Houston wins this division. And as you mentioned, they're going to make some moves and shore up some bullpen that has been surprisingly ineffective, given what they've done, bringing in Josh Hader and others. But so they're going to make some moves there. Houston wins this division. Seattle could make the wild card, but they've got to get some hitting on their side. And Julio Rodriguez, if he continues to be as terrible, that's not a word that it describes what he's done in the first half. He's been terrible. And if he doesn't do any better than that, I don't know. So I like the Mariners, or another team that you just can't hate, but they've got to get some hitting before I'll take them seriously, because I like their pitching. Obviously, they may have the best pitching staff in baseball.
Yeah,
and so that gives them always have an advantage if you have the pitching, but you can only win so many games 1-0, 2-1. So they need hitting. If they can do that, then I'll take them seriously. But at this stage, I don't think they'll make the playoff.
The Phillies are the only team that have given up less runs than Seattle.
That's right.
The difference is that Phillies scored 474 runs, whereas the Mariners have scored only 376 runs. So there's a big difference there. I think Houston wins the division. I do think Seattle makes the wild card, though. I am counting the Rangers out of that.
Rangers are out, no question. And they tried to tickle you just a little bit earlier, like a couple weeks ago, because they had turned it around a little bit.
Quick run, yeah.
But they went right back in the can. And so tomorrow's episode, we'll be talking about some trades, and the Rangers are going to go into trade mode this year in the next week or so, because they're going to be helpful. They're not in it. So.
Okay, let's flip it over to the NL West. Now, the recap is the Dodgers taking this division. They're up 7.5 games on the Diamondbacks and the Padres, 9.5 games up on the Giants, and the Rockies are right where we thought they would be. We know the Dodgers are going to win this division. What's the biggest surprise, though, in this division?
The biggest surprise to me has been Arizona.
Yeah.
Arizona, and not in a good way, and coming off getting to the World Series, and they brought in Jordan Montgomery. I thought that was an excellent signing for them. Hasn't turned out that way, and so they're currently, as you mentioned, they pulled themselves into second, and but all you have to be is one game above 500, and you're
Right.
in second. So that's not impressive. And the Dodgers, despite all the losses, are in first, but they have not been the dominant team. But then how can you be when you lost Mookie Betts and Yamamoto in a single weekend? And then just as soon as this last week, I sit there and come on here and praise my man Tyler Glasnow. And what does he do? Go on the IL. So appreciate that, Mr. Glasnow. So that's like 3 all-stars in one fell swoop right there. No team could have suffered that and be where Philadelphia is. That's for sure. And so the biggest surprise is Arizona, and maybe they can turn this around. I think they can, but we'll see going forward.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the biggest surprise is that Tyler Glasnow has already pitched 109 innings, and he took him this long to get hurt.
Short of what his high is.
Yeah,
I believe wasn't that what it was? 119 innings was his high.
I believe so.
Yeah, that number sticks out in my mind. So.
Yeah,
it comes within 10 innings of it and goes on the IL. So,
a little scary,
a little bit,
but he's been good for sure. I think maybe my biggest surprise, Diamondbacks would be it, but the fact that the Diamondbacks and the Padres and the Giants keep hanging right around each other, and they're not able to separate themselves from any of those three. And I would say the Giants are clearly the worst of those 3 teams, yet they're still in it. The Padres, again, maybe they make a move. They lost 5 straight this week. They look like they had turned things around. And so then you look at the Diamondbacks have to be the team that makes the run here in the second half, just because they didn't lose anybody really off of their team last year, and they added some guys. You would think they'd be better. So anyways, sitting here looking at the Diamondbacks, and oh boy, my dogs just broke loose. Anyways, Diamondbacks, I think, are the surprise team. Dodgers win the division. Who else makes the playoffs?
Well, since this is the National League that we're speaking of, that there aren't any standout teams, that they're all pretty mediocre. I think both San Diego and Arizona can make the playoffs. The only thing that gives me caution is the same thing about what I mentioned about St. Louis. The Padres are another team that's barely over 500 at home. That ain't making it. I've been to that stadium, and I've seen what they get 40,000 a game every night. They cannot be playing that mediocre baseball in front of fans because it's going to come back to haunt them. But they can make the playoffs. We've seen what they can do once they make the playoffs. So I think all 3 of these guys, Arizona, San Diego, and LA, are all in. But San Diego, they need to be better at home. The same with Arizona. And because you could be 500 on the road and survive that, but you need to be better at home. So I see that happening on both sides. So all 3 of these teams in the playoffs.
I think the Dodgers obviously win. I think the Diamondbacks make a wild card spot. I'm giving the Braves one. I said the Reds could sneak in there, so that kind of eliminates everybody else. I think your Padres, Mets, Cardinals, and Reds are looking for that final spot. To me, I think the Diamondbacks figure it out. So I think it's Braves, Diamondbacks in, with everybody else fighting for that last spot there. For sure. So plenty more to talk about. We talk about it every Sunday, by the way, 8 p.m. On the Sports Stove Fantasy Baseball Show. We talk about fantasy baseball, of course, but we take down the Major League Baseball news, look at the standings and things going on there as well. Kevin, we can find you there on Sunday nights. Where else can we find you at?
Well, this is going to be a pretty busy weekend for me, because earlier this morning I was on the No Credentials Required show. And so if you haven't seen that, you can get over there and check it out on the Belly Up side. It's also on YouTube. This morning we discussed the basketball Olympic team, male basketball. And I had to counter Ryan saying they weren't going to medal, so that was an easy counter for me. But we also discussed Joe Burrow, and we talked about the best 5 and worst 5 quarterback rooms in the NFL. So we talked about that. Of course, I'm here right now. Plus tomorrow I'm on the as you mentioned, on the show with you at 7 Central. I know Easton was where time begins, but 7 Central here. And I posted an article, as we talked last week, about the Fantasy All-Star starters. That's out there, as is my article about looking back on the first half of fantasy baseball. So those are available right now. And so, there's always something coming. And we've got a lot going on right now, and I'm pretty excited.
Awesome. Well, you can find me on the Sports Stove podcast every Sunday night at 8 and Wednesday night at 8 o'clock as well on the Belly Up YouTube channels. You can always catch past episodes at the Sports Stove podcast, wherever you get your audio podcasts as well, or the Sports Stove YouTube channel. Also, of course, this show is the Belly Up Sports MLB Midseason Super Show. Make sure you check out bellyupsports.com. There's all kinds of great articles and content there, as well as a link to our media network. And you can look at all the other podcasts available at bellyupsports.com. And there's also the Belly Up fantasysports.com, where you find all of Kevin's articles, as well as more fantasy advice from others as well. So thanks to everyone that joined us tonight. Lots of content creators coming through the program. So make sure you check them out as well. Thanks to Belly Up. Thanks to baseball. And, hopefully we'll see you around tomorrow night, 8 p.m. on the Sports Stove Fantasy Baseball show as well. Kev, thanks for your help, man.
Because we're bringing it.
Yes, we're bringing it. You want to know what it is? You got to come tomorrow.
That's right. You got to show up tomorrow to find out.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in tonight. And make sure you check out Belly Up Sports. And we are what they're not. So we'll see you around the corner.
That's right. Everybody have a great Saturday.